Welcome back to Sacred Arts Channel, where we discuss a variety of topics from the sacred to the practical. Today, we have a familiar face joining us. She was a guest on Beyond Meditation podcast, Rosa Shetty, a licensed mental health therapist from California. Rosa intertwines inner child healing, ancestral generational healing, and spirituality with the latest research-based trauma therapy approaches. Rosa has over 15 years of clinical experience helping humans heal from childhood trauma and intergenerational wounds. Welcome back, Rosa.
Thank you. Thank you, Jess, for having me. It is
Of
such an honor to be back here with you.
Yes, of course. I'm really excited to dive into our topic today. We're going to talk a little bit about soulful sessions, bridging spirituality and psychotherapy. And I'm really curious to know, how does spirituality inform your practice as a psychotherapist? And what roles does it play in the healing process for your clients?
Yeah, so I definitely have to say that it has evolved in terms of the role that it plays in the work that I do with clients. I would say that at the beginning of my career, um, there's always been a question in our when we do an assessment or initial assessment about religious background. So that question has always been asked. However, I don't think it began to inform my practice until I would say the last 5 to 7 years, maybe 7 to 5 years, if even that. I think that the concept of religion was what was more ingrained when it came to school and training to become a therapist and cultural awareness in that sense. But spirituality is so much bigger than that and so much broader. And I think that as I've evolved and matured as a therapist, I've learned not just through the work that I do with clients, but in my own personal experience, I've learned how powerful it is to someone's healing journey, and it doesn't have to be from a religious perspective. In my own personal practice, my awakening or the way I came across my own spirituality was through yoga. I grew up in a very Christian home, and so I was involved in church my entire life. However, I was not. I was religious, but because of the family that I was in, but I was not spiritual. And it wasn't until I went through a very difficult experience in my life that I needed to find more. I needed to find more tools and resources. And I thought that's all I was looking. But I came across yoga, and through yoga, specifically breath work and meditation, and connecting with my body through that process, I was able to expand on my concept of spirituality. And since then, I've included that, and not so much. It happens when it comes to working with folks in therapy. It is, I mean, it's not something that is set apart from the therapy process. It is part of what we do. It's ingrained in the work that we do, whether it is a uh, direct, I would say, training or direct discussion about meditation. And folks sometimes don't see meditation as a spiritual practice, but it can be both. It can be a mental skill, a cognitive practice that you do to calm your mind, your brain, but it can also take you to different realms. So I found that at the very basic level, when it comes to psychotherapy, we talk about meditation, we talk about mindfulness, and we talk about connecting with the body. That's across the board. All therapists, we do this. We do this because we know it works. There's evidence to support these practices. Now, for some folks, when we start a discussion about meditation or taking in deep breaths, that brings their own, basically it opens the door for their own their own awareness of where they're at in their journey. Sometimes that opens the door for them to share where they're at in their spiritual practice. And sometimes it's completely new, or they've never thought about it in that way. And they've realized, well, actually, prayer is a form of meditation. So they start connecting and building on their own spiritual foundation, what they come in already with. So I would say it's just strengthens. And if it doesn't strengthen, maybe it wasn't there before, it enhances the therapeutic process that we have.
That is incredible. As you were describing how you integrate this into your practice, I was thinking about how um when I look as I get deeper and deeper into my own spirituality, I start to recognize a lot of the foundations in psychology. Do you find that yourself as well? Like when you talk about shadow work, like Carl Jung, right? When you talk about
Right.
meditation, that can be very like mindfulness therapy. Like there's so many concepts in therapy. And even in the book that we last read, Women Who Glow in the Dark,
Mm-hmm.
she talks about how a lot of the curanderismo, is a lot like talk therapy and vice versa. I think like curanderismo, I think is a lot older than psychotherapy, but a lot of the
Right.
foundations of psychotherapy is founded and grounded in science because everything that we've studied from a psychological lens, like that is good for the heart, that's good for the mind, for the psychology, is grounded in a lot of these spiritual practices. I find that so fascinating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that you mentioned that book, "Woman Who Glows in the Sun." It is, and she talks about this. Indigenous practices have been incorporating spirituality in their everyday life, and when someone was going through a difficult experience, the community would get together and help this person through ritual, through ceremony, through the elements, through the earth. Through heart to heart pláticas and conversation. So these are what we're talking now in regards to psychotherapy practice. These are indigenous practices that do not get the recognition in the field of psychotherapy. We have founding fathers, so we talk about patriarchy and colonialism, the impact that it has had in our psychotherapy, or just, I wouldn't even say psychotherapy, just in the healing work that we offer others. Um, and it is ingrained in everything we do. And we've been conditioned here as therapists to use evidence-based practices in our clinic or in our practice, just to be, even for billing purposes. If we take insurances, or if you work for an organization, there needs to be evidence to support the interventions that you use to treat your clients. But when we really look at, like you said, when we read certain books and we understand the history of colonialism and how much has been taken from our indigenous cultures and basically rebranded as evidence-based, or even I would even go further than that. Just when you think of, uh, there's a, I'm not going to say names, but there's a current practice that is very, very popular, that it's all about meditation. It has quote unquote evidence to support it. There's a wait list of, I've been on that wait list to get trained. I would say 2 years. I have not been called for training with this model. There's a lottery system. I've read books and I've read about it, and I know about it. I haven't been, trained or certified. And the fascinating thing about it is that it is all indigenous healing modalities. It is all meditation, ancestral work. This specific therapy approach talks about legacy burdens. That is a word that represents things that we carry within ourselves that don't belong to us, that belong to our ancestors. And it goes through this whole protocol to unburden someone. Basically is going through this deep meditation, like a journeying, which sounds very shamanic also. And so when we really look into a lot of these models, that's what we find. So this particular one is a newer one, but this has been going on since the time of Freud. However, it's just it hasn't been acknowledged, but it's always been there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your holistic approach, and the deeper and deeper you get into your own spirituality, how are you seeing that kind of play out in the therapeutic setting? Does that help your clients as well? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So a lot of the folks that I see already come in wanting a more holistic approach, wanting a more integrated approach, an approach that involves not just their mind or the trauma that they experience from a psychological perspective, but also working with the body, with the spirit, with the soul. And these are words that I would say when I started in this field 15 years ago, these are words that I did not use per se, and I did not hear clients talking about when they first seek out mental health treatment. But now there is that shift that is happening, and folks are looking for that, and they use these words. Um, I've had folks call me seeking therapy saying, I want someone that can that can connect or involve the soul, that involve my heart, my spirit, not just what happened to me as a child. I want to know how it impacted everything about me and a spiritual level. This was just recent, and these are things that I would never, or at least inquiries, that I would never receive 15 years ago, but it's happening now. And I think there is a collective shift of awareness, and there's a remembrance. And I think I think this is what we need, because we are not just the mind. We're the mind, the body, the soul, the spirit, and we're not just a piece of, when we're treating someone, we can't just treat a piece. We're not in isolation, and our trauma doesn't happen in isolation. It happens to the whole of us. And I'm just so happy to see that remembrance little by little. It is shifting.
I love that. I think you're right. About a year and a half ago, I started seeing more and more therapists coming in to get Reiki training. And I would inquire, like, how are you going to use this in your practice? Because the whole reason why I didn't get licensed is because I didn't want to get judged, and I didn't want to lose my license for having these other practices. But I'm so elated and so happy to see a lot of this being integrated as somatic practices and as other holistic ways to treat patients that are seeking traditional therapy. That's incredible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think energy healing specifically has a very important, um, it has a very important place when it comes to healing. And I think it is getting the recognition, the more and more of the recognition that it deserves, not as, quote unquote woo woo,
Right.
modality that it used to be, but now it's been it's being accepted more and more as a critical or integral part of the healing process.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we also see it in the therapy world, the psychotherapy world, right? Where, I mean, I feel like when I was in school 10, 15 years ago, studying this stuff, it was still considered very woo-woo in the
Mm,
90s and the 80s. Like, you're
mhm.
seeing a therapist, you must be crazy, right? And now there's so much more acceptance, there's so much focus on the mental health, and now we're taking it a step deeper and really focusing on the heart, and people asking, like, hey, can we talk about the soul? Can we talk about these things that I'm experiencing within myself, which is so amazing, very incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even when you talk about heart resonance, you mentioned the heart. I mean, that's real, right? That's not, and these are things that have been written about, the literature has been out there. It just hasn't been as widely known or maybe accepted and recognized. But think I think things are changing in a positive way, and I think it's just going to open the door to a lot more modalities, a lot more approaches that we have more than what we have now.
100%. I feel that as well. I want to talk a little bit about the concept of a dark night of the soul or a spiritual crisis. How do you guide clients through these deeply transformative yet very challenging and painful phases?
Yeah. So, this is it's an interesting question. And I'm going to go back a little bit to when I graduated from school, I was very young. And when I started working and getting my license, towards becoming a therapist, I was in my early 20s. And I remember the professors used to say, well, you have the training. And because I would feel very, I looked very young. I was young, and I didn't feel like I had enough life experience. And the professor would be like, no, you've done the training, you have the training, you have the knowledge, you're prepared, right? But I can tell you this, it wasn't until I had my own spiritual awakening, my own dark night of the soul, that I was able to fully understand and be in it when it came to having these conversations with someone that was going through a very, very difficult, dark time in their life. And that is what gave me the understanding, not just the book understanding, but my heart and body, I know what that feels like because I went through that. And when we're having these difficult conversations in therapy about it, it's something that you can empathy in it of itself. It's not something that you can convey with words. Empathy is this understanding what someone is going through, um, and putting yourself in their shoes, not as yourself, but as how they're experiencing as themselves. And that deep understanding of what someone's going through, when it comes to this concept of shadow work and navigating a difficult time, I think life experience really, really helps folks feel heard, validated, and understood. And at the end of the day, when you're going through a difficult experience, that's what we're looking for. We're looking to feel heard, validated, and for someone to get us to get understand what we're going through in that moment. And like I said, empathy is a very I would say it's an emotion that is felt beyond words. It's an
Mhm.
energetic emotion that is very, very needed. I mean, it is critical to have in the therapy room. And yes, we can feel empathy for without having to go through it. But when it comes to something like what you described, a dark night of the soul, and navigating these difficult times, in my own experience, I could see how I was before, and I could see how it changed me as a therapist after. And it was, I think it was more in that deep understanding of that pain and that discomfort, and sitting with that as you navigate a difficult time.
That's beautiful. I absolutely agree with you in the sense that empathy is not something you can convey through words. It is an energetic thing. And it's also a beautiful thing when you get empathy because you don't feel alone. You feel like someone actually sees you, hears you, and literally understands what you're going through. So it's so important to have between a therapist and a client, which is why I always tell people you kind of have to shop around a little bit, do the interviews with
Yeah.
the therapist. And,
Mm.
it's not that you have to have parallel lives or the same experiences, but you have to at
Hmm.
least be able to connect
Yeah.
with them on some level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for a lot of folks that are going through that time of just a lot of difficulty, anxiety, maybe getting triggers of past traumas, having that dark night of the soul can also bring in a lot of elements that may not even feel from this world. A lot of times folk experience um, um, very vivid nightmares, sometimes that feel so real that they wake up and they're like, oh my God, is there an intruder in my house? Because maybe that, they were having a nightmare of somebody breaking into their house, and or they hear noises, or they hear things, or they see, they may even see things. For some folks, they describe sleep paralysis a lot. That tends to happen. um, and with sleep paralysis, even though it is a medical, condition, folks that I've helped describe a sleep paralysis as as a supernatural
Mm-hmm.
experience. They
Mm-hmm.
describe seeing shadows. They describe seeing themselves, like floating above them. They see themselves in bed, for example, or sleeping on the couch, and they're outside their body. So there's a lot of these experiences that feel very much out of this world. And I'm because I've experienced that when I was going through a very difficult time. um, I think it helps to not jump right away into a different um, conclusion. These intense sensory experiences happen when you're going through a very, very difficult time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's
And
so,
even without any substances, I mean, it
yeah.
happens for folks. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to get sleep paralysis or I used to call it something different before, but basically when you said, it is a medical condition, in my mind I was like, no, it's not. It's spiritual because and I know it's a medical condition. I do know
Yeah.
from
No, yeah. No, that's what
studying
I meant. Yeah, it is quote unquote medical, but it's also a deeply spiritual process
it
that we
is.
navigate. Yeah.
It is because growing up, I would always get it. Since I was like probably 7 till I was probably about 22, 23. And one of the things my grandma taught me was like when you feel this, like, because sleep for me, sleep paralysis was like something was hovering over me, trying to get in my body, type of thing. And I couldn't move, I couldn't open my eyes. And I am somebody that kind of sleeps with my eyes half open. It's kind of weird and creepy, but it's how I sleep. So one time I was able to kind of see the mirror because I was lying on my side. I could see the mirror and I could actually see something floating over me. But when my grandma taught me, and it's a spiritual thing, right? I know that mentally it's a medical condition, but because I'm so ingrained in my culture, what she used to teach me is you say Sagrado Corazón de Jesús en vos confío 3 times. And sure enough, Rosa, anytime I would say that, it would go away. Like nothing
Mm.
happened. And so anytime I feel this deep-seated fear or something happening spiritual wise, I say those words and it's gone. So I share that story because
Yeah.
I don't know, I was just called to share it, but
No, I think it's part of it. Yeah, it's definitely part of it, and I can relate to what you just shared because um, same thing. I mean, going through a difficult, and this happened for me personally. Anytime I'm going through a difficult time, these things happen where I start having sleep paralysis, and just supernatural things that I can't. Maybe there is a logical explanation, but because I'm in this stress mode, I don't find a logical explanation at that time. But I also learned to do our Dear Father prayer in Psalms 23. This is what I learned when I was a kid. My mom taught me, when anytime you feel scared at night or in the dark, say Psalms 23 or Padre Nuestro. So, and like you, when in moments like that, I'm sleeping, but I'm not. You're in this weird in between state. I find myself saying these either Psalms 23 or Padre Nuestro, and that's how I'm able to wake up. So
mm,
when my clients share these experiences with me, I usually have them think of I don't tell them which prayer or Bible Bible verse to say, but I usually have them come up with with a mantra. It can be a prayer. It can be something from the Bible if they believe in that. But to write down something that can help them when they're navigating a very dark experience, whether it's in their sleep or whether sometimes when you're, sometimes other people, can trigger very dark thoughts and experiences. So this is something that when it comes to a spiritual practice, this is a very important one because it happens. This in between states of consciousness can be very scary, especially when you're already not in a good place in your life.
Yep, totally agree. I'm really curious to know, how do you see women's spiritual experiences and challenges as distinct or unique in your practice? And are there any patterns or themes that frequently arise for women?
For women, I found that women, I mean, I primarily work with women. I don't have a lot of experience, and this is by choice. For most of my career, I mean, initially I would see everyone, and, different points in my life, I would see, whoever I get. But in the last few years, I've specialized to work with women primarily. And I love working with women because, in general, I think women tend to be a lot more open to different ideas and beliefs. Women tend to be more open to trying new things, new interventions, to connect with the body. Uh, and I'm sure men do too, but I don't work with men, and especially since I've incorporated more of these spiritual practices, I found that women are just so open to trying whatever it is, whether it's meditation, whether it's inner child work, whether it is ancestral work. They seem to be a lot more open. And again, it could just be the women that I work with, because there is, a certain demographic, I would say, that is open to working with me. But that's what I found. I found that for a lot of women, there is this kind of what we were saying earlier, there is this remembrance. I've had so many of my clients say, uh, you know, since we've been talking about this, or, sometimes I give specific book recommendations. I realized that my grandma used to do X, Y, and Z, or I realized that my mom used to go to this temple when I was in, and I forgot about that, and now I'm asking her what was going on at that temple, or what was this group about, or this gathering that you take me. So there is this openness, which then leads to a remembrance of their own lineage, their own medicine that is already running through their line, through their lineage.
I love that. It sounds like the theme, or what you're calling in probably with your own energy, are women that are wanting to remember, or wanting to go deeper into healing those generational wounds and to expand their own consciousness. And I think that's so beautiful. I always find that when we open ourselves up and when we're healing ourselves, those that we're treating, or those that are in our relations, right, tend to also be working on similar things, or are ready to work on the things that we've already healed ourselves as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel that, it also becomes a ripple effect. The when we heal, we inevitably influence those around us, our sisters, our mothers, and that affects them in their own process and their own journey for healing as well. And it may not look like your journey, but they're also waking up and remembering through
Mm-hmm.
our own experience and what we share.
Yeah. I love that. I also love how it works when you're ready and you open up your heart and you're like looking for the answers. You get presented with opportunities to learn about whatever it is you're ready to move forward on. So that's really amazing. I'm
Yes, absolutely.
curious, sorry. I'm curious to know, have any of your clients, past, present, um, have they ever reported any mystical or transcendental experiences? How do you approach these in therapy, especially in discerning, the psychological implications.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting. I was sharing with a friend a little bit ago, and this is something that there's actually a book about this, but um, I practice EMDR, and that's primarily what I do for trauma healing. And EMDR, essentially, we're working with the brain and processing areas, experiences that the brain has not been able to integrate. Mostly very traumatic experiences. Our brains are actually not designed. Our mind, our body, our sensory, our nervous system is not designed to experience overwhelming traumatic experiences. It's not wired for that. So when something does happen that completely overwhelms our capacity to cope, which is what trauma is, our brain doesn't quite know what to do with it. So it almost creates like a bubble, and it just kind of leaves it there floating around. Imagine like a book that falls from the bookshelf and it's just kind of there, and it has not been put back. It has not been integrated. Our brain doesn't know what to do with what has happened. That's trauma. So when it comes to EMDR, it's a way to process trauma, but it can also be, in a way, a bit of a hypnosis, especially because we're doing bilateral movement. Traditionally, and there's different ways of doing it, but traditionally, you do when we're doing EMDR, your eyes are moving from one side to the next. We're doing bilateral movement with our eyes, and there's a series of steps, but essentially that's what it is. What I found is that after some time working with someone, it could be, I mean, I would say maybe even a year or two. So definitely when there's been some progress, when things have moved along, I've noticed that some patients are able to go into a deep hypnosis. And what has happened is that hypnosis, I don't want to say they're aware, and we're talking, we
Right.
continue to have an interaction. And then in that interaction, some of the folks that I work with have seen in their mind's eye a deceased loved one, or they felt their love in that moment. And it is something that has happened a couple of times. It doesn't mean that they see the deceased loved one in the room. They see them in their mind's eye. But what happens that I found fascinating is that they experience a sense of somatic remembrance. Like it feels to them like they're they're there, but they're not. So it's an interesting thing that has happened, not too often, but it has happened. And when the first time it happened, it was more, there is a protocol within EMDR that helps your brain integrate what we call a safe person, and we work through that. And a lot of times folks say, well, I want to, that my safe person was my dad, he passed away. And we work with that is a direct a direct intervention that we do. However, these experiences that folks have said happen when we're navigate or working through other things, and that have been maybe things that they were stuck with, and suddenly they see their loved one in their mind's eye, and they feel a sense of warmth, they feel a sense of love, and typically we end that session on a very good note. And when it has happened, I always find it so fascinating because I mean, I'm not a medium, that's not what I practice, but it just feels so magical,
Yeah.
to have this experience, to see your loved one in your mind's eye, and then to experience that sense of warmth and love that you felt being near or being with that person. Yeah, so
Incredible.
that's so I love that. And yeah, it like I said, it has happened a few times, and it's always so fascinating. And I just go with that. I don't. try to reframe it or try, it's just, EMDR, it strengthens whatever it's coming up in the moment. So if someone's saying, I'm seeing this, or I'm feeling a sense of love, it's like, okay, well, let's go with that, and let's work with that, and let's reprocess it or process that. So I just kind of go along with it. And then after we close that EMDR session, we talk about it, and, I validate whatever it is that the client thinks of it. I don't try to input what I think of it, but I'm a believer in the spiritual realm. So when I hear these experiences, I feel like that was their ancestor, that was their loved one from the other side, showing up for them in this moment of difficulty, of feeling stuck with a particular issue. But yeah, sometimes patients say that themselves and they believe that. Others are a little bit more, they're not quite there, and they just see it as a wonderful thought or image to receive. But whatever it is, it helps. It helps.
Yeah.
It helps them in that moment. Yeah.
I love the thought of being able to access that remembrance or that feeling of being in the room with someone that has passed. I feel like it is one of the most healing things to experience, especially if you've recently lost them or if you've been missing them, you're going through something in life, and maybe the person on the other side was somebody that you would confide in, like to be able to capture a moment of being in the same room and feeling their presence is absolutely magical. And I mean, I am a true believer in ancestors coming and visiting as well, but I'm also kind of experimenting with and sitting with the idea of paradoxes. Because you mentioned earlier, there was probably a logical explanation for this happening. And yeah, there's probably is. But what if we're imagining all of this? I don't think it matters. What if it's both, and having both paradoxes and being able to kind of live in that world? Because for me personally, I'm very grounded in science. I'm very grounded in based evidence based. That's just how I'm classically trained. And so I want to know every experiment that has been done before I get into energy work or whatever, right? And recently I'm trying to let that go and just feel that magic in the moment. And I love that you're able to experience that with your clients and that you're able to witness some of these transcendental experiences that they're having.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, when even this is a very specific situation that I've experienced with EMDR, but sometimes it could come up even in a meditation, even just in a guided meditation, especially when it comes to doing inner child work, and we do this guided meditation. Sometimes they see their loved ones there, and this sense of otherness, of something bigger, of spirituality, of the universe, God, it manifests in so many different ways. But I think that well, as my role as a therapist, what I try is to allow my clients to make sense of that for themselves, and 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 most of the time, whether they think it was just their imagination navigating this a meditation, that's okay. It's like, let's have your creativity be an ally on your healing journey, and whatever your mind brings you, you're ready to experience. So yeah, and so I think it's more of a being in a place of just allowing what is showing up, and just allowing it to be whatever it is that in that moment helps you to make sense of.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've learned the hard way to do is just witnessing people and allowing everyone to be right and no one to be wrong, even if I have a different opinion, right? And it feels like there's a lot more grace and flow when I'm in that state versus trying to get in there and insert what I believe or whatever opinion I have. So that's really beautiful. So I'm curious, some argue that trauma can lead to profound spiritual awakening, while others view it as block to spiritual growth. What's your perspective on the intersection of trauma and spirituality?
I I don't think trauma necessarily is a block to spirituality. What I think is that when we are very, uh, I wouldn't, well, stuck, it would be a word that I use, but when we have not worked through some of our traumas, not that you can still be spiritual, you can still go to church, you can still do your meditations and do yoga, and it doesn't mean that you're working through your doesn't mean that your traumas have been addressed. It doesn't mean that you've healed certain wounds from the past. I don't think it's one or the other. There are folks that once, what I've seen in my practice is that once they're able to work through some of the difficult experiences from their past, their yoga practice, for example, or even if they're Catholic, their prayers take on a much deeper meaning. So I definitely don't think they're separate. I just think that it may, as you heal, your own spirituality will take on a deeper or maybe just a more profound meaning in your life, and it can help you in a much deeper way. Because what also happens, and I know you and I have talked about this, is the spiritual bypassing,
Mhm.
instead of getting the help that I need for the sexual abuse that I experienced, I'll just you know do yoga retreats and back to back, or go to Costa Rica and do this deep um, ayahuasca experience. And what happens is that folks tend to dysregulate sometimes, even more, or sometimes things from their past, maybe even memories that they have suppressed, tend to come to the surface. And so that's why it's very important to be spiritual and be very mindful about your practices, and not bypass your own emotional, psychological, and physical healing. Yeah.
Oh, yes. I know so many people that just go from ceremony to ceremony to ceremony, never integrating, never journaling or just intaking what they just did or processing what just happened, right? And I mean, that's the essential like definition of trauma, like not processing an event that happened. And so it's time to really look inward and it can even cause more spiritual growth and up level people. But you got to stop and look at it, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. I think it could be it's a powerful heal, but it has to be used wisely and in conjunction with your own healing.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So we just went through a journey by reading Women Who Glow in the Dark. We mentioned it earlier. What are a few things that resonated with you on the flip side? What did you learn about yourself through this incredible book?
Yeah, what was interesting, I think you and I were talking about this earlier too, that my family is a lot more alike to other families than I thought. I there was a sense of recognition in a lot of the words that the author used, and in the the just the terms that she used to represent situations and things that I went through. For example, she talked about empacho. She talked about susto, which is PTSD, espanto. She talked about um, mal de aire, and using an egg for a limpia and ritual. So there's a lot of elements that I was able to, in a way, acknowledge and remember, because I think growing up, this I would see these things as, well, that's what my grandma used to do, or and I had an awareness, but it wasn't until I read her book that I began to integrate some of these things, that I began to recognize, well, empacho, how does empacho really feel? Like, well, how do I feel if I have empacho? How would I feel? So I think I started integrating more into my everyday experience and being open and to having these conversations with my mom and realizing that as I was bringing up different things to her that I was learning from the book, she was like, "Oh yeah, this is what this is what that is for," and this, and I realized that she knows a lot. She has a lot of knowledge and wisdom that was never. I guess I was never curious. I never asked, but through that book, that awareness has helped me to learn more about where my family, where I come from, my mom, her mom, what she learned from them, from her abuelita. So it's been I love that book for that, and I'm so grateful for bringing that awareness into my life.
Yeah, I'm super grateful for it. And I'm grateful for the book club that you formed with Maria, I think it's her name. And it has really opened me up to a new community and new sources of books where I I looked at my library and was like, wow, I read a lot of books that are not from my culture. Like, and so having this resource has really opened it up for me as well. And I love hearing how it's affected you and how you're exploring more into your own background. And it's so incredible how all of these things that have been taught for hundreds and hundreds of generations still somehow has reached us in this generation. And you're probably also going to continue to teach that because I mean, if you're using words like this around your children, right, they're going to get curious. So I think that's really, really
Right. Yeah, and being mindful about how I use these words and to, growing up, I think I thought it was just like superstition. I don't think there was an emphasis on these beliefs. It was more like, well, this is what happens, this is what we do, and you know, I don't think there was an effort to pass it on,
yeah.
as healing wisdom, as
Yeah.
medicine. It was more like, well, my grandma did this, and that's what it was. But now I feel like that there's that desire for me to pass it on and and let it be known to my daughter, to my kids, that these are important, these are valid, these are legitimate ways that we can heal. These are ways that we can call our experiences, a label our experience, and so I think giving it that importance is what I want to pass on.
I love that. That's beautiful. So we were talking about dreams earlier, and I know that this is a favorite topic. So I want to bring up one of my favorite founding fathers of psychology, Carl Jung,
Mhm.
among other therapists, really deeply valued the role of dreams in psychotherapy. Do you find a spiritual dimension in dream work, and how do you integrate that with your clients?
Um, you know what? One of the things with dreams, I love talking about dreams just because when I was going through and actually it's not just a lot of times when I'm going through a process where I don't know what to do or which way, what decision to make, and when it's really, really affecting me, I've noticed that I tend to get answers in my dream. And one particular one that comes to mind, this was like maybe 15 years ago. It was whether or not to end a relationship, and I was sitting with that for a very long time. And then in my dream the answer came, and I woke up and I knew exactly what to do, and I felt peace with it. So ever since then, I've learned to really listen to my clients' dreams, and I encourage for them to find their own meaning. I mean, there's clients that are not open to that are very open, but those that are open, I like to encourage an exploration of themes, to encourage what I like to ask is, how did it feel to be in your dream and experience X, Y, and Z? How did you feel? So in exploring those feelings in their dream, and then especially if it's relevant to an experience that they're navigating or a decision that they have to make. So I love talking about dreams, and I personally have found a lot of wisdom in my dreams. And for the folks that are open, we go there, we explore it, and a lot of times there's a lot that we can get information. I like to say information from spirit. I feel like that's how That's how we communicate. That's how, for those of us that are not, well, I talk about myself, I'm not a medium. I'm not, I don't consider myself a psychic in that sense. So for me, dreams, my dreams are what connects me to the other side, to the spirit world. And so I love talking about dreams
Yeah, me
with my
too.
clients. Yeah.
I remember growing up, my mom had a ton of dream books, and I've always been a lucid dreamer. And I mean, my dreams are never, I've asked for them to come with grace and ease these days because they've never been like, it's always like some disaster or some nightmare that happens for me to like wake up and understand what's happening in my life. But I absolutely agree with you that dreams can be windows into solving some of the things that we're looking to solve or decisions that we're trying to make. So that's really amazing that you do that with your clients.
No,
And
I've had some clients that describe their dream, and it sounds like they're having like some type of hallucinogenic experience. They're so deep and rich and out of this world. And then when I hear people that have done um, ayahuasca or some other type of plant and remedy, they sound very similar.
yeah,
So,
yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting how your level of consciousness altered through plant medicine can put you into that dream state, right? Or wherever we go when we dream. So, you have this incredible podcast. Can you tell my audience about the work that you do there and where they can find you?
Yes. So I have a podcast. It's called Inner Healing Paths Podcast. And I interview folks from all walks of life. Jazzy, she's been a guest on my show. And basically I like to talk with people that help others heal from different modalities. So I've had physical therapists, people that talk about plant medicine. I've had Jazzy talking about Reiki. We talked about crystals. So basically here we have all types of conversations related to healing, and because I firmly believe that the path to healing is, sorry, what I meant to say, there's different paths that lead to healing, and it's not just one way. It's not just through therapy. It's through different modalities. So I like to explore that and show folks, that different ways that they can also heal. Sorry, my daughter, she
It's
woke up
all
and
good.
she's really
No
calling for my
worries.
attention. But yes, that is what the podcast is about, and yeah, and I just love having these conversations.
I love it. Yeah, I love your podcast and the way that you celebrate
Thank
women,
you,
especially Hispanics and Latinas. Like, it's really powerful. So I encourage everybody to check it out. Thank
thank
you,
you,
everyone, for sticking with us through the end. Look forward to seeing you all next week. Please give us a like and a subscribe down below. Let us know what you thought about this topic, and we'll see you next time. Thank you all.